Hello, folks. Happy Anzac Day. Now, Susan JW requested this one a while ago, and I was going to do it earlier in the month, but she also, when I said that, she mentioned it again on a different Sabaton reaction video that I did, and I said that I'd got it planned, and she said do it on the 25th of April because that is Anzac Day. So that's why I'm doing it. This is going to be a long one because we've got the music video and we've got a two-parter history video from their Sabaton history channel, which I enjoy doing those afterwards because it gives you the background and the story and the history of it, and that's really good. Because the only thing I know really shockingly about Gallipoli is I've watched the movie with Mel Gibson back in the day, and that's it. So I really know nothing about it, so it's going to be really interesting to see and hear the history behind it. But first of all, we're going to get into the music video. And thank you again, Susan JW, for the request. And let's give it a go. Settle in, folks. Get your popcorn because this is going to be a long one.
From the other side, hear them calling for my folks, now friends are resting side by side. They will never leave our hearts or fade away, live forever. They were far too young to die in such a way. How many wasted lives, how many dreams did fade away, broken promises they won't be coming home. Oh, mothers, wipe your tears, your sons will rest a million years. Found their peace at last, as both turn to friend and forget. And they knew they would die. Gallipoli left their letters in the sand. Such waste of life, Galipoli. Dreams of freedom turn to dust.
I like that intro. I like that little interlude with just the piano before it went heavy again. I always love their heavy, and they're really getting into it. we're headbanging. I would join in, but I've got headphones on and they go flying because they're quite loose as it is. They're too big. I've got them as tight as I can and they're still not tight enough. Yeah, it's interesting and such a waste of life. Gallipoli is such a waste of life anywhere, isn't it? War is it's just such a waste. I was just a quick, I know this is a long video anyway, but just quickly, the thing I was saying to John, my husband, the other day was what fascinates me is that we're so busy fighting over everything when I was watching a video about the origins of man, and it was more about the Neanderthals and that the Out of Africa event. We all basically date back to the same area, which in Africa we're all from that area. And at some point, several times, I'm sure it's happened. There's been migrations out, but this one particular one I was watching was like around 47 to 50,000 years ago, and there was a group of people that migrated out of Africa and met up with Neanderthals and interbred with them. So that, and the other groups of humans that migrated out of Africa probably perished because they were smaller groups and they would have gone extinct and died off. Whereas this is where we date from, is this intermingling with Neanderthals, because we've all got 2% DNA. Neanderthal DNA apparently, and I was thinking that when you put it in context with war, and hatred and racism, and you think at the end of the day we are fighting ourselves, literally, that we are fighting our brothers. We are all related. We all go back to this one part of Africa. This is where we're all from, and yet we're fighting each other constantly. It's crazy. Somewhere down the line we are all related to each other, and yet we can have such hatred. And what's the point of it? What is the point? Anyway, enough. Let's carry on. I'm sorry about that. Let's carry on. Skip it if you don't want to hear me just waffling on. It's too late now. You've had to listen to it. But let's carry on. Love that bit of piano.
Hell is waiting where the ocean meets the sand, cliffs of burden, where the soldiers rushed into to death. At the shoreline, blood of heroes stains the land. Light a candle, one for each of them who fought and died in vain. There is no enemy, there is no victory, only boys who lost their lives in the sand. Young men were sacrificed, their names are carved in stone and kept alive. And forever we will honor the memory of them. And they knew they would die. Galipoli left their letters in the sand. Such waste of life, Galipoli. Dreams of freedom turn to dust. How many wasted lives, how many dreams that fade away, broken promises they won't be coming home. Oh mothers, wipe your tears, your sons will rest a million years. Found their peace at last, as hope turned to friend and forget. And they knew they would die. Galipoli left their letters in the sand. Such waste of life, Galipoli. Dreams of freedom turn to dust.
Whew. My ears enjoyed that. That was good. I really like that. Awesome stuff. I'm going to move us along quickly because I'm talking too much in that bit. We're going to get on to, where are we? Part one. Let's hope the volume's not too loud. Part one. This is 16 and a half minutes. Then we've got a 15-minute long section as well. So you can stop now if you don't want to go any further. But this is the history ones. Yeah. So let's get into it and find out exactly what happened, shall we?
Now, this song is going to be covered in 2 episodes, so I can cover 2 aspects of the topic. Gallipoli. For 8 months in 1915, that name was headline news worldwide.
And our song, Cliffs of Gallipoli, is a tribute to the men who fought and died there.
The Great War was just a half-year old, but casualties had already risen to unthinkable levels. British soldiers were dying by the tens of thousands in the bloody stalemate on the Western Front. Leading politicians began looking for an alternative to the slaughter in the trenches. Most vocal among them were Lord Kitchener, Secretary of State for War, and Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, who thought that instead of trying to beat the Germans in Flanders, they should strike towards the weakest link of the Central Powers, the Ottoman Empire. They believed the Ottoman military to be second-rate, more of a nuisance than an equal. Churchill envisioned a strike against Constantinople itself by sea. Taking the Turkish capital would drive the Ottomans out of the war and open up a direct shipping route towards Britain's Russian ally. Indirectly, it would safeguard British interests in Mesopotamia and Suez as well. So on paper, this seemed like a total win-win for the Allies. A major reason for the British hubris was the recent military record of the Ottoman Empire. Serious defeats during the Balkan Wars and the recent catastrophic outcome of the Battle of Sarikamish just weeks ago, where tens of thousands of soldiers froze to death in the Caucasus Mountains, painted a picture of incompetent leaders and a badly equipped and trained Ottoman military. The sick man at the Bosporus would be no match for the professional British soldiers. There was, however, a major obstacle along the way. To strike against Constantinople, any Allied fleet would have to penetrate the Straits of the Dardanelles that guard the entrance to the Sea of Marmara. And those straits were narrow and had been a natural line of defense for centuries. And the sick man was not as sick as the British believed. Since the Balkan Wars, the defenses of the straits had been continually improved and ammunition restocked. In addition to long-range guns, the Ottomans had mobile 120-millimeter howitzer batteries on the ready, highly trained troops, and line after line of mines in the waters. Under Çanakkale Fortified Area Command of General Fahri Pasha, the Dardanelles became the most fortified area of the whole Ottoman Empire. The British and French fleets tried to force passage through the straits. Even a modern warship can be sunk by a single mine, though. And after disaster on March 18, 1915, when the Ottomans sank 3 Allied battleships and severely damaged 3 more, the Allies had to rethink.
Hear them whisper, voices from the other side. Hear them calling, for with foes no friends are resting side by side.
Sorry about this.
The artillery positions on the hills had to be taken out first by land if the operation towards Constantinople was to succeed. The task was given to General Sir Ian Hamilton, in overall command of the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force. The MEF included, along with British units, the Anzac, Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, under General Sir William Birdwood. Anzac had been heading for Britain before being diverted to Egypt. Instead of fighting Germans, they would now fight the Ottomans. The Australians, New Zealanders, and Maoris of Anzac considered themselves natural soldiers, men hardened by daily outdoor activity, and the aggressive and unruly character of the Anzacs seemed perfect for the task ahead. The MEF was further strengthened by an Indian brigade and the Gurkha Rifles, who joined the Anzacs and a French force at Malta in early March. The French government was not too keen on the whole endeavor, but they themselves had their own ambitions in the Middle East and could not simply leave it all to the British if they succeeded in toppling the Ottomans. The French created the 1st Division Corps Expeditionnaire d'Orient, made up of regular French troops, the French Foreign Legion, and Senegalese and Zouave forces. Once again, though, the planning phase betrayed the arrogance of British high command. While generals on the western or eastern fronts made plans for all sorts of eventualities and for a quick exit if everything suddenly went to hell. Nothing of the sort was prepared for the Gallipoli landings. Instead, Hamilton's plan was overambitious and it had one critical flaw. It all depended on the Ottoman inability to stand up to the invaders. But what if they did not turn and run and instead stood and fought?
Great.
The German influence over the Ottoman forces was personified by General Otto Liman von Sanders in command of the Fifth Army at Gallipoli. Ever since the naval attacks, it was thought that an invasion might take place. And the British did little to hide their intentions. In fact, the Greek newspapers ran headlines about the coming landings. But the Gallipoli Peninsula was large, and the Ottoman forces could not guard every beach. Von Sanders decided to put only a screening force as a tripwire defense close to the beaches and keep most of his men in reserve units further back. Ottoman officers at the front would assess the situation and send in reinforcements where necessary. One such officer was Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Kemal, in command of the Ottoman 19th Division. He was familiar with the defenses, and his troops were well-trained, motivated, and equipped. In fact, with the help of German instructors and weapon supplies, it was quite a formidable fighting force. The landings began the night of April 25th. The Anzacs would land on the west of the peninsula at a place called Gabatepe, later known as Anzac Cove. They would build a bridgehead and advance the next day all the way to the heights of Maltepe. The other British troops would land at the tip of the peninsula, Cape Helles, and then take Achibaba and the Kilid Bar Plateau in one fell swoop. After that, they would simply join forces and push the Ottomans from the heights. There were also several diversionary landings around the flanks, with the French landing on the Asian side of the straits at Comcale. Illuminated by the moon, the Anzac landing craft made their way towards their destination, fighting the strong currents. The beaches were in darkness and all was still, and hopes were high that they would fully surprise the enemy. But as soon as they made ground, the first bullets crashed into the boats. A concert of rapid rifle fire erupted, and the battle for Gallipoli had begun. Anzac was not even facing an entire battalion, but the sudden fire caused confusion as the first casualties began to litter the beaches. As more and more Anzacs landed, the outnumbered Ottomans retreated to higher ground and into prepared trenches. And as the sun rose, they fired freely into the mass of men on the beaches. The Anzacs had been ordered not to load their rifles and instead rushed up the hill, bayonets fixed. But in the dim morning, it was hard to navigate the steep heights and the thorny undergrowth, and the Ottomans fired and retreated further. The Anzacs were soon left out in the open, trying to make sense of the rough terrain, climbing the high ridges, running through razor-sharp thorns and over slippery stones, soon left the men exhausted, and many fell to accurate Ottoman sniper fire. The maps were totally inadequate, and the officers still standing were overwhelmed by the situation. The Ottomans themselves retreated towards the heights of Chunuk Bair. From the high ground, they could direct artillery fire onto the beaches. Mustafa Kemal was among the first to understand that the landings at Anzac Cove were not a diversion, but were the real deal. He ordered his division to Sari Bair, the highest point on the peninsula. But while he himself was trying to get a better view of the situation, he saw exhausted men flooding back from the fighting. Upon ordering them to stop, they declared that the Anzacs were moving up and they themselves had no ammunition left. While Kemal's orderlies were running back to get the division moving, he ordered the men he'd halted to fix their bayonets and turn back to attack with the now famous words, "I don't order you to attack, I order you to die. In the time which passes until we die, other troops and commanders can take our place."
Hell is waiting.
Stop that.
The ocean meets the sand.
Jeez.
Cliffs of burden. Where the soldiers rushed into certain death.
The pursuing Anzacs were totally caught off guard by the sudden counterattack. Fearing that Ottoman reserves had already arrived, they pulled back. Everywhere around Anzac Cove, the Ottoman resistance began to stiffen. Attempts to cross the ridges were immediately met with heavy fire from an unseen enemy. The invaders were stuck. At Helles, the situation was even worse. Way worse. This was an obvious landing site, and the Ottoman defenders had prepared thoroughly. As the Allied landing craft closed in on the beaches, they were met with a deadly hail of bullets. Many men were hit before they could make landing. Others panicked and jumped into the water. Many of those drowned, dragged down by their heavy kit. But those that made it out of the boats met belts of barbed wire guarding the beach, trapping them in the open. Soon, bodies littered the beach, and the waves washed ashore blood red. The men lucky enough to make it through huddled down behind a sandbank. At just 5 feet high, around 1.5 meters, it was the only cover available. Again, there were only a few Ottoman platoons defending the area, but they had fortified trenches and knew how to use their rifles and field artillery to deadly effect. The British officers could only watch as the landing crafts were blown to pieces. The men at Hellas were trapped. Similar scenes happened at the other landing places. Y Beach was shot to pieces, while the attacks on X and S broke down the same way as the main landings without major results. Often forgotten by the history books is the French landing at Kum Kale, the only semi-victory that day. That force, under General Albert Damada, was to silence the Ottoman guns on the Asian side of the straits and divert Ottoman troops. Their actual landing was nearly unopposed, but the overall Ottoman forces facing them were far more numerous than on the European side. Fighting for the tiny town lasted all day, but the vicious close-quarter combat was for naught. The invasion plan had failed. And as darkness fell, it came as a relief. For the exhausted Ottomans, it was time to fall back and reorganize and wait for the reserves. For the Allies, the cover of night was a saving grace. Finally, they could make a move. Men could come ashore, the injured could be tended to, and fresh officers could take charge. The wounded flooded back to the medical ships. But the doctors and nurses were not prepared for the amount of casualties. There was not enough room. There was not enough morphine. And even if a wounded man survived, it was still a journey of 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers, back to Alexandria to recuperate. And so the first day of Gallipoli came to an end. But the campaign had only just begun.
How many wasted lives? How many dreams in
Crazy.
broken promises they won't be coming home?
So, Joachim, tell us a little bit about the musical side of Kleso Gallipoli. Well, that's a good question, Joachim, because it's actually a song that took a long time to write. I started writing it in 2006, and it's actually one of those projects. Sometimes you start writing a song, and it takes a while before you get it done or finish it. But in many cases, it's been lying dormant. You haven't been working actively on it. In the case here, though, I think I constantly wrote on that song almost every day for 2 years.
Like, okay, so the finished released version, does it sound very different from when it came out?
Oh, yes and no. I mean, I don't know how many songs. I mean, all the parts that were taken away for that song probably could consist of 2 more songs in it. You know?
Wow.
Same thing for Bismarck, actually. It's probably 3 songs worth of writing in there. It didn't take as long, though. But with Kleso Gallipoli, I just felt that I had something special going on. And it's not a typical Sabaton song at all. Well, you know, you get these, you fall in love with some of your projects a little bit more.
Right.
And sometimes a little bit too much. This is one of those cases. I really felt it was something I wanted to make perfect, as good as I could. And for once, I actually think I couldn't have done it any better. Probably someone else could, but at least
your
I
song.
couldn't. And it's one of the few times where a guitar solo I wrote ended up on the album.
Aha. Now, did you write the music and the words, or did you just write the music and the words?
The lyrics was written with me and Per together.
Okay.
Yes, really one of the most fantastic stories. And you know, in most cases, we actually get to visit the sites we sing about after we've done the song.
Oh yeah, sure.
And in this case, when we came to Gallipoli the first time, that is spooky because it's like paradise.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful there. And then you think, you know, you're walking around, what the, you know, where are the trenches? And then you almost fall and break your leg. It's like, okay, I guess there are the trenches.
Well, that's such a different contrast in the same war. Like, you know, we've talked about and we visited together like locations on the Western Front at Verdun and stuff, and it is really somber. And it is, and you feel that there's been war here. But when you're like overlooking the Dardanelles and stuff, I mean, it's just fantastically beautiful. You don't think, I mean, there are sure, there's earthworks and that they've rebuilt, and there's some physical buildings and defenses, but you don't see it unless you're thinking of it, that this was a place where thousands upon thousands of people died in horrible conditions.
No, I mean, and I also think that I would have done things differently. I mean, if me and Per had been there and seen that, we would have built in some parallels of, you know, the contrast of then and now in a way.
Oh, that'd be very interesting too. Well, maybe you could write another song about Gallipoli.
Yeah, I mean, this one gets 2 episodes, so maybe we should cover it again.
And
what do you think?
you've got all that extra music that didn't make the final. So you've got
That is actually a really brilliant idea.
So you've made Cliffs of Gallipoli. This could be like the bays of Gallipoli, or the Sea of Gallipoli, or the Dardanelles.
The shores of Gallipoli.
Shores of Gallipoli. I see.
Ah.
All right. So on your second album, Great War Part 2, that's going to come out, your 90s R&B album comes out in 2020.
Yes.
That's going to have Shores of Gallipoli on it.
Yes, a trap beat. Cool, man.
All right. Well, I think we've all learned something today.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Joachim.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you next time.
Sort my hair out now. It got very chilly suddenly.
All right, and here's some cool stuff going. We're gonna do our older albums with the History Channel editions. That's got indie speaking. It's cool as I can't say that word. Anyway, you should become a Patreon because then you can get that stuff. See you soon.
See you soon. Okay. We will switch to the next one. Sweet. There. Okay. Come back and move on. That was really interesting. I didn't realize just how, well, you're going to know it's going to be bad, but you don't realize how bad and how many thousands. So while that's happening, and then you get to the Second World War and nothing's learnt, because then you've got Omaha and places like that just slaughter occurred. We just don't learn. Anyway, let's carry on.
Idel.
And I'm Per from Sabaton, and this is Sabaton History.
This is part 2 of Cliffs of Gallipoli. Now, we covered this song in 2 episodes, so I could cover 2 aspects of the topic.
And the song took us all the way from Sweden to Turkey.
The initial Gallipoli landings, which we covered in part 1, had been both a tactical and strategic failure. The Allied troops held onto their beachheads and had managed to conquer a few ridges and hills around the landing sites, but that was nothing compared to the objectives set for them. The invasion plans were far too ambitious and were based on the belief that the Ottomans would be easy enemies to defeat. By May, the Allies should have cleared the whole peninsula. Instead, the Ottomans had the advantage, and they brought in reinforcements, machine guns and howitzers, while fortifying the higher ground. German General Lehmann von Sanders had had time to read the reports of his Turkish officers and commit his reserves. And although their localized counterattacks were stopped by the invaders, it was clear that they would not just sit and remain passive forever. On the night of May 19th, the Ottomans gathered a large force of fresh reinforcements from Constantinople and Smyrna under Esad Pasha. Thousands of cheerful young men, praying for God's help, went over the top towards the enemy. But the Anzacs facing them had been well aware of the build-up to the attack. As daylight broke, 10,000 casualties littered the narrow fields of no man's land, piled on top of one another. Like everywhere in this war, the firepower of entrenched machine guns and determined riflemen had created an impassable wall. And the Ottomans learned a lesson by blood. Never again here would they try to attack on such a large scale, and instead would focus on smaller skirmishes, raids, and their relentless snipers. Soon, the stench of rotting flesh in the summer's heat was too much to bear. A short armistice was arranged, and men from both sides went onto the battlefield to bury the dead. It was the first time here that the men came to know each other without violence. Curious looks and even small gifts were exchanged.
It's crazy.
Trench warfare set in on the Gallipoli Peninsula, and soldiers on both sides realized they were going to be there for a while. To escape the constant threat of shells and sniper fire, men began to disappear under the earth, into trenches and dugouts. The peninsula was soon transformed into a maze of trenches, saps, and strong points, zigzagging through the rough countryside. Both sides mined and countermined each other, while on the surface, skirmishes were fought all the time over the narrow plateaus, steep ridges, and hilltops. Places like Dead Man's Ridge, Battleship Hill, or Lone Pine were constantly contested, and yet, at Anzac Cove, the men found ways to communicate with the enemy. No one wanted to die needlessly, so sometimes instead of bombs, they might throw a pack of cigarettes over the parapets or toss across a can of bully beef. The French on the far right at Helles had similar live and let live arrangements with their enemies. Like if both sides had to cross a certain gully to bring in fresh water, they would plant little flags or signposts, and as long as no one ventured further than that, they would not be shot at. In the British sector of Helles, though, there was no such fraternization. Ottoman High Command loathed the British imperialists and thought them to be the major aggressor in this war. Both sides fired at the slightest sign of movement, harassed each other day and night with artillery, and gave no quarter during advances. The overall situation at Gallipoli changed little over the summer. The Allies needed more men and artillery to achieve anything bigger than taking the next ridge before them, and the Ottomans had all the time in the world to strengthen their defenses. Here and there, brave attacks and successful bluffs continued to improve the Allied positions, but they did not change the overall stalemate, and larger assaults led to massacres and huge casualties for both sides. While the Ottomans were defending their homeland against foreign invaders, the sense of the whole point of the campaign began to be lost among the Allies. Clearly, they were not winning this battle, and clearly they were not advancing towards Constantinople. They could not even advance towards the next ridge without losing friends and comrades. The dehydration due to the constant lack of water, which they had to import from across the sea, the ever-present sniper fire, the flies, fever, lice, dysentery, morale plummeted, as did the health of the soldiers. Because life at Gallipoli was never safe. You could dodge bullets, you could dodge shells, but it was harder to dodge illness or dodge exhaustion. High Command was aware of the lack of progress, but what to do? Send in more men in the hope of achieving something? Was victory even still possible? And if not, how to end this? British Secretary of State for War Lord Kitchener feared the loss of British prestige in the Islamic world if they retreated. Such a retreat might also encourage other nations to join the Central Powers. But you know, the common soldiers cared little for such concerns.
They will never leave our hearts or fade away, live forever. They were far too young to die such a way.
August was supposed to change things. A new landing at Suvla Bay that would open the possibility of a left hook, and in concert with a breakout attempt at Anzac Cove, would disrupt the Ottoman hold over the peninsula and finally open up a way to the Sarıyer Ridge. Diversions for the landing at Suvla took place all over the peninsula. But though there was still a lot of fight left in the exhausted Anzac troops, the plans of High Command were simply out of range of what was physically possible. And the landings at Suvla Bay faced the same problems as the landings before that we saw in Part 1. Under fire and in unmapped territory, the men quickly lost track of time and space. And although they advanced quite a bit inland, they were soon checked by determined Ottoman reserves and had to dig in. They did not meet any of their objectives. The August battles brought no major changes to the overall situation. A fatalistic mood set in over the Allied forces. In September and October, men and guns were further worn out, and the weather began to turn. The heat and the flies vanished, sure, but the approaching winter was even more threatening. The thought of evacuation began making the rounds. By October 14th, General Sir Ian Hamilton, in charge since the beginning, was dismissed, and General Sir Charles Munro took his place. Munro had a more realistic approach than Hamilton. By the end of October, he had visited all 3 landing sites and came to the conclusion that the whole campaign was nothing short of total disaster. The Ottomans still occupied the dominating heights, and the overall lack of sufficient artillery and supplies would not challenge that. He telegraphed his opinions back to Kitchener, but Kitchener didn't believe him and went to see for himself. And yeah, Kitchener could barely hide his shock over the whole situation either. By the end of November, the War Committee had approved the evacuation. Problem was that this is easier said than done. Immediate evacuation would result in a massacre if the Ottomans caught them halfway through, but with winter approaching, they could not wait for long. The temperatures dropped significantly. Heavy rain poured in from the heights down into the trenches. Cold winds from the sea hit the exposed troops. Frostbite grew rampant. Although the Ottoman soldiers were in the same boat, they at least had a short supply chain, bolstered by gifts of things like winter clothing from the people of Constantinople. The only real option for the Allies was to evacuate without the Ottomans realizing it. The plan was that they would lull the Ottomans by reducing activities to a minimum. The Anzacs and the 80,000 men at Suvla Bay were first. As they stopped responding to the enemy's shelling, the Ottomans came forward, but were met with rifle fire. As this was repeated, the Ottomans got used to the silence. Over weeks, the Allied lines were gradually thinned out until only a screening force remained. Sappers began booby-trapping the trenches, supply stores, and dugouts with tripwire explosives. On the night of December 18th, the final evacuation began. The Ottomans suspected nothing and, in fact, were only alerted by the fire and explosions as the last men set the fuses. The evacuation was a masterpiece in planning and execution. But what about Hellas? Now that the Ottomans knew what was up, could they be fooled again? By diverse patterns of counterfire, periods of silence, they gave the Ottomans a false sense of activity until January 8th, when the evacuation of Hellas finally began. The last men in the trenches were almost crazy with nerves, because if the Ottomans had sniffed out their little trick, they could easily overrun the beaches. But the night remained silent. Everything that could not be brought away was booby-trapped or destroyed. It was not until the last British soldiers had left the beaches that the first Ottoman patrols caught wind of the evacuation. The evacuations were complete successes.
Something was, at least.
Blood of heroes stains the land. Light a candle. One for each of the gun will fall and die in vain.
The full story of this battle, the Dardanelles, is clad in many tales and legends, which I encourage you to look up for yourself. But it had some lasting effects, even long beyond the war. For the Australians and New Zealanders, the Anzacs, the fight for Gallipoli grew into a part of their national identity. It was their baptism in fire and the beginning of a unique legacy separate from Britain and the British Empire. And for the Turks, the battle actually served to form a bond of friendship between those former enemies. They shared the same feelings of pride and valor, sacrifice and loss. This is perhaps best expressed by the following words attributed to Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore, rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us, where they lie side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are at peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well.
Mothers, wipe your tears. Your sons will rest a million years. Found their peace at last, as both turned to friend and forget. And they knew they would die. Gallipoli.
Now, at the very beginning, you said this song took us from Sweden to Turkey. Can you tell them a little bit about that?
Yeah, the whole idea, I mean, we get a lot of emails like, write a song about this, write a song about that. But when it actually came to Cliffs of Gallipoli, we were playing a show in Netherlands.
In the Netherlands?
Yes.
Okay.
And a guy came, he was a songwriter, a songwriter doing several big artists in Turkey.
Okay.
He explained that I have an idea how you can write a song about something that you probably never heard about. And it's about my home country, Turkey.
Okay.
And a battle that took place there. And it will fit totally to your to your music. This guy came prepared and he gave me this whole bunch of papers.
Yeah.
He-
But
he
you
came-
knew the name Gallipoli before, or no? Had you heard?
No, I mean, this is a song that has many years in the making.
Right.
It became like something for Turkish people. This was very important.
Yeah.
It is important for the Anzacs as well, for Australians and New Zealanders.
And forming that friendship between the enemies, between the Turks and the Anzacs.
That was one of the things that inspired us from
The
the
dog's
beginning.
kicking off.
Like the speech about the Turk, or the memorial wall,
Right.
where it says that here no nationality needs to be mattered because here we are all brothers. This stone was very important in the inspiration for writing the song.
There is no enemy, there is no victory. Only boys who lost their lives in the sand.
After we released it, we were not sure like what is gonna happen now, but then we got the invitation because this guy, he had some contacts in Turkey, and he was like, guys, I think that you need to perform this song in Turkey.
That's cool.
And I was excited because we had never been there, so of course I'm always open to playing in new places.
Yeah, sure.
When we were sitting in the restaurant, all the TVs, we constantly saw advertisement for us.
Wow.
This was something we'd never seen before.
Yeah.
Today, we've
Yeah, but this was before you got that
yeah,
big.
yeah. This is more than 10 years ago. So this was the first time we actually saw like, wow, we're on TV.
Yeah.
We saw the interest for Sabaton once we landed there was ridiculously big. And what people would do when we just wanted to have an ice cream, you know, they would clear tables for us in a bar so that we can have an ice cream. The big event was, of course, Sabaton performing
Yeah.
in a TV.
Yeah.
And this was a quite big television channel and nothing that we have ever done before. But it was hilarious how it worked on set, because in a big TV station, normally you have strict rules,
sure.
what is happening. But in this case, I think that all of them were so excited about having us there
Yeah, that's really
that they
cool.
didn't care about rules.
That's awesome.
So we were allowed to do whatever we wanted in the studio and play as much as we wanted. So it ended up with us playing pretty much a set, like a gig
On Turkish TV?
on Turkish TV, and there were people in the crowd and sitting there, and it was an absolutely amazing story, and I loved that thing. Was what the Cliffs of Gallipoli led to.
Well, thank you very much, Per. Okay, that's it for Cliffs of Gallipoli, and this was Sabaton History.
Left the letters in the sand. Such waste of life, Gallipoli.
So that's it for this week. And if you become a Patreon on some of the levels, you have a possibility to get a special edition of the Sabaton new album and all the previous albums. So don't forget to become a subscriber of the YouTube channel, become a Patreon, and see you soon.
Okay. See you soon. That was interesting. It was interesting. Thank God they bloody got them evacuated without any more bloodshed, because that would have been horrendous. So at least they got something right. And it's fascinating, isn't it, that we saw this at the Christmas truce, and you see this now with them throwing cigarettes to each other and cans of food. And you just think it would make so much more sense that if you've got a government that decides it wants to go to war, then you just fight the other government and don't get all these poor bloody people who just want to live their lives and get on with their lives and survive and make a living and provide for their families. And you're dragging them into this, and they don't want it. Nobody wants it. It's just frustrating that we can't just get along, and it's the bloody leaderships that cause these problems. Anyway, I really enjoy that. I'm not going to keep going on because this is a long one. What are we on? We're on 44 minutes. So all the links to all of the original, the music, to the two histories will be in the description. Please go and give them a like. And show them some support. And if you enjoyed this, please consider giving me a like as well. And I hope you did enjoy it. Even if you were just here for the music, that's fine. Anyway, there will be more Sabaton. It's been a month since we did the last one. We got this one done. We will be doing more. So let me know in the comments any others that you want to see. I have got a list I'm working through. But the most popular will get done probably first. So yeah, that's it, guys. Have a good one. Be good. If you can't be good, be careful. I will see you in the next one. Take care.